Okay, welcome everyone. As you know, your mic is muted and your video is off, so please do communicate via the chat. I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of my social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens. Your donations towards this event have gone towards increasing resilience, inspiring and raising aspirations in teenagers. And if anyone wants to find out more about Rocking Your Teens, please go to www.rockingyourteens.com. And my colleague Snetta, I think, will be putting the link in the chat so that you can find out more if you'd like to. My name is Jenny Garrett. I'm an award-winning career coach, author, and leadership trainer. My books explore the empowerment of working women in leadership roles. And together with my team, we use our years of experience in coaching and leadership to support women and ethnically diverse leaders to progress in the workplace, as well as supporting majority group leaders to make inclusion actually happen. We have a little trigger warning for this particular webinar, which is about avoiding burnout. We might touch briefly on content related to suicide, self-harm, addiction, and eating disorders in this session. It won't be in any depth, but I wanted to warn you all. So let's get into it. Many leaders are always on, and with boundaries between work and home blurred, it's never been more difficult to switch off. I've definitely experienced it over the last 18 months. For some, this has created work-life harmony, but for others, they're teetering on the edge of burnout. Coined by the psychologist Herbert Freudenberger in the 1970s, burnout describes a severe stress condition that leads to severe physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. And it's typically work-related. It's much worse than ordinary tiredness. Burnout makes it challenging for people to cope with stress and handle their day-to-day responsibilities. And people experiencing burnout often feel like they've nothing left to give. They may dread getting out of bed in the morning. They might even become a bit more pessimistic about life, and may even feel hopeless at times. Burnout doesn't go away on its own, and if left untreated, it can lead to serious physical and psychological illnesses like depression, heart disease, and diabetes. My wonderful executive coaches, Janice Taylor, give us a wave, Leyla, Okhai, Carol Stewart, and Obehi, Alofoje, share their experience and guidance on the topic with you today. Their insights will provide an invaluable and refreshing pause, new perspectives, and also, I hope, challenge your thinking. So I think, as I always like to, I want to start with a poll. You're going to be able to find out more about Janice, Carol, Leyla, and Obehi in our diverse coach directory. And that directory is being set up because there just wasn't enough diversity around when it came to looking for coaches. Coaches can make an amazing impact at the top of organizations where the majority group is often not from a particularly diverse background. They can provide be a critical friend, provide some reflection, provide insights. And also those in organizations just trying to break through that glass ceiling, having someone who looks like you, empathizes with your situation, can really help you with that guidance and navigation you need to work through an organization. So I do encourage you to look them up on the diverse coach directory. And again, if Snetta hasn't done it already, she will post a link to it. They're amazing coaches. I completely advocate for them. They've gone, looks like someone muted me, a rigorous process of being qualified, of being reference checked, making sure they're really credible. So do look them up in our diverse coach directory. So I want to go to a poll. And the first poll, really I just want to understand your experience in and interest in the topic. So what is your interest in burnout? Are you worried that you might be experiencing burnout? Are you worried that someone close to you might be experiencing burnout? Do you want to influence your workplace to understand more about burnout? Do you want to learn how to support your team with burnout? or perhaps you've experienced burnout before and you want some strategies so that it doesn't happen again. Or maybe it's something else. Just let us know. I'll give you a moment to complete it. Okay, I always like to get to over 80% of you, so I'll give it a little bit longer. Now, some of you might be fantastic on social media, and if you are welcome to tweet about this event. You can tag our speakers. Snetta's going to put their tags in the chat, but Leyla is Diverse Minds UK. I'm at Jennifer Garrett. Carol is Abound Solutions, we haven't got Janice there. Maybe you'll have to put it in the chat, Janice, because you're Blue Sky, I think, aren't you? But if you put it in the chat. And also please use the hashtag Avoid Burnout, please. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Oh, 96% of you have completed it. So that's fantastic. So I've ended it and I'm sharing the results. It's quite a mixture, but 33% of you have experienced burnout before and you're seeking strategies so that you don't experience it again. So a third of you. 25% of you want to influence your workplace to understand more about burnout. And I agree that understanding well-being is really important in the workplace and what the strategies are that can help. And then 17% are worried that you might be experiencing it. We've got something for all of you, but it's great to hear where the majority of you are coming from. I've got one more poll for you. And it's just a very quick and easy one. If I can get it back up. My polls seem to have disappeared. Okay, not sure what's happened there. So I'll just ask the question. Are you confident that you could raise the topic of burnout in the workplace? Type a Y in the chat if it's yes, and an N in the chat if it's no, and a U in the chat if it's I'm not sure. So just type it in the chat. That will be absolutely fine, as my polls seem to have disappeared. Let's see what's coming through. So are you confident that you could raise the topic of burnout in the workplace? Y for yes, N for no, U for unsure. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of Ys. As a guess, I would say it's probably 60-30. So about 60% of you feel that you can raise it, about 30% no. So maybe by the end of this session, we'll be able to get that figure up. So let's get into it and let's hear from our amazing coaches. Be great if we can get them all to introduce themselves before we begin. I'm going to start with you, Leyla. Be great to hear a quick intro from you.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Leyla Okhai. My business is Diverse Minds, enabling healthy, mentally healthy, equal and happy workplaces through coaching, consultancy and training.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leyla. And over to you, Obehi.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here this morning. My name is Obehi. I'm a psychologist, stress management consultant, and productivity coach. And I work with high-performing individuals and teams. My company, Oral Wellness, helps businesses to implement effective and impactful mental health strategies in the workplace, mostly by coaching line managers and people in leadership to help identify signs of burnout, and techniques to have open and safe conversations before we get work. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much, Obehi. And Janice.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. My name's Janice Taylor. I'm a career coach and writer. I'm based down in Brighton, and I've been running my business, Blue Sky Career Consulting, for over 20 years, really helping people to gain clarity in the direction they want to take their careers so they can move forward with renewed energy and focus. People do tend to find me when they're feeling a little bit stuck. And over the years, I have worked with a few people recovering from burnout and breakdown. So that's me.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Carol.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Carol, as Jenny has said. I'm the founder of Abounding Solutions and author of Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman. I'm an executive career and leadership coach, and I specialise in introverted women who are senior leaders. I also work with organisations to develop their talent and provide a range of leadership development, career development and personal development workshops, trainings and talks.
Fantastic, fantastic. As you can see, they bring such a wealth of experience from different perspectives, which is going to be really valuable. And I think what that means is that we don't always agree with each other. Sometimes we build on each other's ideas. Sometimes we come at it from different directions. I just think that adds to the creativity and the wealth of different perspectives that can help you on your way. So my first question to you all, and we're going to, how the process is going to work is that I'm going to ask a few questions and then I'm going to open it up to you as the audience to ask questions as well. So do feel free to be thinking about the questions you'd like to ask. Snetta will be keeping an eye on the chat and we'll do our best to answer those questions, time allowing. So the first question. To help our audience identify if they or someone close to them has burnout, what signs of burnout have you seen in clients or yourself? And I'm going to start with you, Obehi.
Hey, thanks, Jenny, for the question. Before I wanted to talk about what the signs might look like, I think it's important to clarify, because I don't want to assume the knowledge level of people in the audience. Burnout isn't stress that's just interchangeable in the words at all. When we talk about work-related stress, we're talking about people where demand and pressure is not matched to ability or energy or capabilities, that kind of thing. But with most regular stress, you would adjust to it either by finding solutions to it, or if stress goes away by itself because, the thing is over. But when we talk about burnout, we're talking about stress that prolongs itself. So we're talking about 6 weeks plus. In my practice, I tend to work for about 3 months, where somebody had gone into something new and the pressure and demand is frustrating, but they're not going above it. So that's when we talk about burnout. So now what does that look like when we talk about how you can tell if someone has signs of burnout? I tend to categorize in 3 stages. So when we talk about someone who's not coping with stress well, and it prolonged itself about 6 weeks to 3 months, I now say they've gone into stage 1 burnout. What that looked like is called stress arousal. So we have symptoms like headache, persistent headache, irritability, anxiety. People may not notice, but people close to you at this point will notice it. And you yourself will notice that you're complaining more of headache or just feeling uneasy. So that could go on for a few more weeks or days, depending on the situation. And then you might go into what we now call stage 2, which is energy conservation. So now your body is depleting a lot of the chemicals that it produces, like endorphins and serotonin. And so what you start to notice is your persistent tiredness, because your body is fighting to solve this problem that you're trying to deal with. And so what that looks like could be procrastination, reduced sex drive. It's obvious to people who are closest to you and maybe your colleague at work now, because you're more snappy, that kind of thing. If that doesn't get solved, it has no choice but to go into the 3rd phase, which is exhaustion. So this is stage 3, and symptoms might look like chronic sadness, depression. This is when somebody might be diagnosed with situational depression, or an old depression would flare up again, or just physical, mental fatigue. You're just tired constantly. You are pessimistic. So you're the person in the office who all of a sudden shut down all the great ideas and who used to be positive and now just pessimistic about a lot of things. And of course, it's at this stage, you might have someone with suicidal ideation where they start considering suicide, or the fact that they think they're better off dead. They don't necessarily want to die, but they just want the pain, internal pain, to stop. So at this rate, I would recommend talking to a GP and that kind of stuff. So that's what I noticed in practice when people come in, those signs and how prolonged and how they escalate as the months go by. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, really helpful, and really helpful to think about. What we're focusing with today is we're not doctors, so we're not focusing on that 3rd level. We're really keeping it at that, hopefully that you can tackle it at the 1st level before it escalates. And our strategies and our thoughts today are really around that 1st level, where it's prolonged stress, but it hasn't got to the point where you might have to see a GP as yet. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So Carol, same question to you. What are the signs that you've seen in your clients or yourselves of burnout?
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen signs in my clients and in myself as well. So not at the stage 3, but sort of approaching stage 1 to stage 2. It could be things like working excessive hours and not being able to switch off. So taking work home with them evenings, weekends, always feeling that they've got to be on the go working, not spending time with family, getting snappy with their family, snappy with their kids, and also relying on substances to keep them going, such as increasing their alcohol consumption or the increase of junk food or chocolate, things like that, to try and keep themselves going. So those are some of the signs. And with myself, I didn't actually experience burnout, but back in my days when I was a senior leader, we weren't going through a particularly challenging phase at work, and I was bringing work home with me all the time, evenings, weekends. And I noticed that I was getting to a stage where I just felt stressed all the time, and I just didn't feel that I could relax. And I recognized I needed to do something about it. If I carried on as I was, I knew that I couldn't carry on like that. It was a feeling, this feeling where always feeling anxious.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think touching on that point about the alcohol and junk food, that leads to another problem, doesn't it? So you have one problem, which is burnout, but then you physically become unwell. So it's sort of a bit of a vicious circle that you can experience, or a domino effect of other issues. Janice, what about yourself? What have you seen or experienced?
I've seen and experienced to an extent disrupted sleep patterns that can just go on and on and on. And I think to me, there's nothing worse than not waking up, not feeling refreshed and ready to face your day. And that can lead, I guess, to a lack of energy. And I've also seen people, there's a lack of spontaneity and joy about someone. It's almost like they're trudging their way through their day, and it's just about putting one foot in front of the other. So those are the sort of things I've seen. Life just seems to be one long trudge. So yeah, that's been my experience, and that's what I've seen as well.
Yeah, sleep deprivation is a form of torture, isn't it? And absolutely, a lot of people who experience depression, it starts, I think, a lot of the time with that lack of sleep and that lack of being well. There are many reasons why people experience depression, but it can lead to that. So thank you very much. And Leyla, what are your thoughts?
I think in terms of spotting the signs in others, it's any kind of change in behavior if you know someone, and it might be quite small. And it's not to jump on someone, like you said, we're not, most of us, some of you might be practitioners, medical practitioners, but to try and have the conversation. And usually we know that, particularly in British culture, if you say, how are you? People say, I'm fine. So you say, how are you? And asking twice. So the whole Time to Change campaign, #AskTwice, I think is really, really useful. Often I think people as well can be reluctant to speak because, it can be much easier to suffer in silence. You think everyone's having a tough time. Who am I to feel like this? So getting out, going for a walk, walking side by side as opposed to face on can really help people just talk about some of the things that they're going through, and acknowledge that it's not easy, and you'll have to probably rinse and repeat. Obehi's practice is all about being proactive. So how can we, when we spot that, don't be afraid to discuss that. And I think in myself, one of the signs for me is I start becoming very late for things. And I'm not a late person. So it goes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then it slips because it links to that stage 2 that Obehi outlined, and procrastination, which isn't me. So you'll know the changes, and also thinking about what changes can I spot and who do I want to go to and who's my support network around that.
Fabulous. Some really great tips there, Leyla, actually. And I like that thing where you notice it in yourself. So for those who are watching and saying, I don't want this to recur, think about what are some of those things, like, oh, I'm starting to be late, or I'm starting not to feel motivated when I wake up in the morning, or I'm starting to need not just 1 glass of red wine, but 2, that, and then using that to help you think about how you can reset. So a second question for you. A recent report from Indeed found that employees' burnout is on the rise, and there are lots of these different reports with varying statistics, but they're all about things increasing. 52% of all workers are feeling burnt out, according to this research, and that's up 9% from pre-COVID survey. Employees of all ages and types are experiencing the impact of stress, fatigue, and mental health challenges. So why do you think burnout is so prevalent right now? And again, have you seen the trend in your coaching clients? Starting with you, Carol.
Right, I think the past 18 months has been quite challenging for a lot of people. So a lot of people have experienced heightened stress levels anyway. And what I have seen with clients during the pandemic is that the boundaries between work and home have been blurred because they're working from home. So they are starting the day probably earlier than they would normally and then finishing later. They feel like they've got to always be switched on. And then also if they've got kids and they've been homeschooling them as well, that on top of it has been quite challenging for somebody. And also, but there's more global working and people working across different time zones as well. So the culture of some organizations is that, you know, you're always available for clients. And so that can mean if you're in the UK and your organization works with clients in the US, that you feel that you have to be available in the evening when it's their daytime. So the boundaries have become very blurred, I think, over the past 18 months.
Yeah, and it just generally, if you think anyone who works shift work, it always took a toll on you. But because it's online and at the touch of your fingertips, I don't think people appreciate that in the same way that they might have done if you were leaving your house to do a shift that was sort of 12 lunchtime to 12 at night or whatever it might be. It's not acknowledged unless you're actually physically going. So I really agree with you in terms of this global working and its impact on others. Janice, what about you? What have you seen or what do you think's been happening?
But to echo quite a lot of what Carol was saying, actually, that there are, the clear distinctions between work and family life are really blurred, and for some people perhaps just not there really. I also wonder about whether, people using the same technology to sort of communicate with their family, and then similar technology or very, to communicate through work. So there's something about this box, I think, that you're constantly staring at it. And I have seen some reports around Zoom fatigue. It does take brain a lot more work and energy to communicate via a camera, and looking at yourself can be exhausting as well. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I was really delighted when they've added this function where you can hide yourself on Zoom now. You don't have to see yourself all the time. It's like, yes, thank goodness for that. But I completely agree with you. It's really difficult because you don't have, particularly that point you made, which was at the height of the pandemic, sort of, oh, I've worked all day on Zoom and now I'm going to do a quiz on Zoom and now I'm going to have wine with a friend on Zoom. It's like, no, it's just, there's no separation there. And there's a lot about work-life harmony and blended work life, isn't there? But I guess in some ways, what I'm hearing is a bit of an advocacy for compartmentalizing your life a little bit more to be able to manage it. So yeah, that's an interesting thought. So Leyla, what about you? What do you think has created this increase?
I think it's quite a few things, isn't it? And I think if we look at that burnout list that we talked about at the beginning, so many of us have experienced that. And I think because we're not getting the usual stimulation that we have and doing everything through a screen. But I also think the systems weren't brilliant anyway. And what do I mean by that? That, there are lots of areas of public sector that weren't invested in and funded in prior to the pandemic in the way that they should have done. So it meant that everything was really being stretched as it was. For example, the British Medical Association is in their recent surveys found that their helpline for doctors and medical staff has increased by 80% over the pandemic. So if you throw in COVID and you throw in mental ill health, you think about being on the front line in a medical situation, of course that's going to be exacerbated and burnout is going to be prevalent, and sadly we are seeing more of that level 3. But also things like homeschooling, not being able to do your elderly care, social care being very, very tricky for people, and it's very difficult. And so I think that it was brilliant that we did clapping for the heroes, for the health heroes, but then of course they didn't get the pay increase. And we also talked about, as a collective, well, the word hero can be very stigmatizing, and I know Janice, you were talking about this, and if you're meant to be held up to that, and then you think, oh, but should I be phoning a helpline? I'm a hero, I'm the one who should be helping people, who am I to ask for help? I think all of those things, and being in a household where you might be sharing space, you're all feeling pretty low ebb during the pandemic. So often if we have that, it's a bit of a seesaw sometimes. Someone can lift you up in a family situation, but it's been very difficult for everyone. So that has been challenging to manage, and not being able to lift ourselves up in the same way. So I think that's increased the likelihood of burnout.
Gosh, so many good points there. Last but not least, Obi, what would you add to what's being said?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of that. That's all contributed to it. And it's interesting because everybody is different. And so what would have triggered one person's burnout is something else for somebody else. But generally, that is in keeping with the stat that we have for mental health rising to 1 in 4 at the moment. And which is scary because it used to be a bit 1 in 8, 1 in 10. And what that means is the pandemic created generalized anxiety and increased in people's ability to cope with stress in general. The thing that they were using to cope before, like, even just getting on the train and switching off before you get to your destination, that one didn't happen. Meeting friends for dinner, that was not happening. I mean, how many times can you walk around your block? You know what I mean? So there was some level of frustration where you can't actually offload the stress before you get into the burnout state, like we're saying. People were also dealing with bereavement, even if it wasn't you personally, it was someone that you knew. And because there was some level of, people using work again, escape. If I'm working, even if I'm doing all the hours, at least I can control it. I don't have to think about stuff that I can't control. I can't go on holiday. I can't do anything. I can work, and I can do some of those things. So I think that added to that pressure, really. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you were talking about bereavements as well at one point, that the sort of the loss of people and how that impacted everyone as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers going up and down, and then realizing that you now know someone who passed as a result of COVID, and that coming closer to those increased anxiety. Even now that we're out and about, people are still a little bit anxious. They're braving it out because the alternative is not good enough to just carry on staying home. But people are going to deal with the thing they refuse to deal with during the 18 months, if that makes sense. So yes, so that's what I was saying.
Lovely, thank you. So we're going to our last question that I want to ask. I have seen a few come through which we'll ask, but feel free to be typing in your questions into the chat. So the last question that I want to ask is, so what resources, activity, or sources of support would you recommend for someone who thinks that they might be close to burnout? You might want to share your own well-being practices as well, if you've got anything that's been helping you. At this time, I'm going to start. I'm going to start with you, Leyla.
So I think one of the most important things is acknowledging your emotions, to say, actually, I don't feel great. I feel a bit rubbish. I feel a bit low, because maybe that helps us to think, well, what's the strategy then I need? What's the thing that could make me feel a teeny bit better? It's not about saying, okay, I'm going to feel fully 100% motivated. I've got to stop it. And I think often we do that. We put things to one side. So I would say that's definitely one thing. Maybe you want to write it down, acknowledge that. Thinking about as well what you do have control over. So it could be something very, very small, but it could be, I've got a gap in my diary at 10:30, so I'm going to go and get some fresh air. I'm going to go drink my cup of tea outside. And thinking about shaping your routine and what that looks like, and maybe that you think, I'm watching a bit too much TV, so on Wednesdays I'm not going to watch TV and I'm going to read a book or do crochet or DIY or whatever it is, and doing something. I read a really recent quote from someone that their university professor had told them in America that doing something worth doing poorly is better than not doing it at all. So we think, oh, I have to do an hour of yoga, but actually doing 10 minutes of yoga, and it's not perfect and you might not get your poses perfect, is better than not doing it at all, because that little bit really helps you. And integrating small things into your daily routine, so having some deep breaths while the kettle's boiling, can make a big difference. And I know this because when you stop doing it, that's when you think, oh, actually those small things do make a huge difference. Now, of course, if you need support, you need to get support, but I think it's recognizing that and thinking, what can I do and what else do I need in my strategy, and what might I need to do if this carries on?
Wonderful. Gosh, so much there. We will share this with you afterwards, because there's a lot that you're being given in terms of great practices and great tools to help you. I'll go to Carol next.
Right, so what I would suggest is tap into your workplace support. Most organisations have some sort of workplace support or well-being support. So tap into that and make use of it. If they don't provide any support like that, or if you feel that you don't want to go, because sometimes there is a bit of the taboo subject around it, so you may feel that you might not want to go to your employee the support services, then if you're in the UK, the NHS, their website, they've got a page with, there's great access to resources and support. So if you just Google, do a search for NHS burnout support, you can find resources on the NHS website. Make sure that you are taking regular breaks during the course of the day. So take a lunch break and go outside, get some fresh air, go for a walk, and so that you can help to sort of lower your stress levels and practice mindfulness. And you don't have to spend half an hour meditating or anything like that. Leyla has sort of given a great suggestion about when you're making a cup of tea. Practicing mindfulness just helps you to bring yourself into the moment, into the present, and not let your mind and your brain sort of race ahead, worrying and panicking and feeling stressed. A simple technique is just to be aware of the environment around you. One of the things I used to do back in the day when I was a leader, when I was commuting, was I would be on the London Underground, and I would practice mindfulness by just being aware of the different noises around me, the noise from the engine, which ordinarily on a day when you're on your busy commute, you don't notice, but just allowing yourself to be still and just observing, oh, this is the sound of the doors closing, the doors opening, the engine sort of revving up to make them go off. Just little things like that can help you to be in the moment. And it could be when you're driving as well, just being aware of your surroundings and really taking in and noticing the changing of the seasons, the flowers and things like that. Or it could be going in, if you're in the office, going into the toilet and just sitting in a cubicle and just allowing your mind to be present and focusing on the here and now, rather than racing off and worrying about 101 different things. And I would also say about developing your self-awareness so that you are aware and you can identify when your stress levels are increasing and when they are being prolonged. And you can develop your self-awareness through self-reflection. Something like journaling is great for that, and just writing down how you're feeling and examining your thoughts and why you're feeling that way and what's going on for you. So develop your self-awareness, because it's so much more easier to recognize that when the signs are there.
You coaches are giving so many golden nuggets of wisdom today. Gosh, it's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. Janice.
Thank you. I would say if you can, build as much elasticity and flexibility into your day as you can, so that when things do pop up, you can just pop them into existing gaps in your diary if you can manage that. I would echo what the others have said as well. Take regular breaks as much away from the screen as you can. If you can get outside and feel the fresh air on your face, and then you can use that time to practice your mindfulness and take note of what's going on around you, that would be great too. And if you create small regular habits that support you. One of the things I do in the morning, it sounds strange, is I iron. It's not something I enjoy particularly, but I find myself ironing, and it just calms me down and helps me to start my day in a good way. Again, I'm a great fan of journaling, and I think quite often we have a lot of things swimming about in our heads, and it can be really helpful to get them down onto paper. So, and that will also maybe help give you some sense of control over what's happening around you as well, I think. So certainly get your thoughts down on paper. And finally, establish a regular going to bed routine. One of the things I do, I don't look at my phone after 9 o'clock. That's just a small thing I do. No screens for me after 9 o'clock. So yeah, those are a few of mine.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Obehi.
Hey, you know what? For me, it's the intention. To me, this whole thing, and everything that Carol, Janice, and Leyla had said, is about the intention of it, making conscious efforts to do the things. So as opposed to, I regularly walk to the tube station, but if you're not conscious of the fact that that's what you're doing for your well-being, you may not notice that you are doing stuff. So we're talking about stage one, right? So this is the part when you know, okay, something is off, I need to start doing things. So it's even more important that you get more intentional about it. The exercise that you're doing, how much of it? So if you were running 20 minutes every morning or whatever, or 4 times a day, a week, you might increase it a bit. You might up the dose to 30 minutes or walk longer. That kind of, for me, I don't like running, but I will walk around the block. I'll meet a friend and we'll go around the block and get a coffee and walk around the river and just do a longer walk. But while you're doing that, you are also being mindful of the fact that you are doing it, that you're not still problem solving when you're someone in front of you. So you have conversation, you share, you open yourself to people, because it reduces the pressure. You might think that, oh my God, the idea of sharing things that I'm concerned about might be scary, and it is scary to open up to people, but just the act of doing that reduces the pressure for you. The act of doing that allows you to find problems, or you solve the problem faster than you would normally. And so you avoid that whole idea of feeling lonely, even though you're not, or feeling alone. And that's usually one of the things that increases it. So for me, these are the things that you could do. I've got a Apple Watch. A few times it would buzz at me and I would remember to take a deep breath and breathe out and just do that for like a minute, just like Leyla. At any point in the day you find yourself just quiet, that allows you to now know there's something off. I need to do more. I need to talk to someone about things. So that's what I would say there. In terms of prevention, in taking time off work, that's what I would say. A lot of people tend to stockpile their annual leave. I've done this before, when you're like, I'm not going to take 2 weeks off to sit at home. I need to find a holiday somewhere. Everybody's traveling as much. But I would like people to think about taking a few days off every quarter and using those days to reflect, to recharge, to writing a journal. If you don't do it every day, that might be an opportunity to, like to say, to start thinking, what do I want? Am I okay? Am I dealing with some issues right now? But you do need the quiet time for that to come out, because a lot of the go, let's just constantly be on. It's like running towards burnout without knowing that you're actually doing it. It allows your body to start replacing some of the chemicals it lost, serotonin, dopamine, all of that stuff, that to come back in your body. So that's what I would do that. And the final tip that I use is that I tend to maximize my natural energy. So if I'm not a morning person, so this is early. But when something like that, I went to bed earlier because I knew I had to do this. So this is how you start adjusting your energy. I'm better towards the evening. So I might do like hard concentration work and reading in the evening, which means I'm just maximizing the energy my body naturally produces. So that kind of stuff also helped me. Fabulous. So that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really, really great. So we had a question from the audience, which was, men suffer in silence much more than women do. Does anyone think so when it comes to burnout? Any insights? Anyone in particular want to maybe give me a hand if you'd like to respond to that question? Okay, Obehi?
Yeah, I think that came up a few weeks ago, one of the meetings I was in. It's not necessary that women share more, because we are used to sharing. We've learned the skill of sharing and being open. Men, on the other hand, have learned to not. But one of the research that we saw last month, something about how men talk to people. In other words, if they're going through a relatively difficult time, just something to do with work, they will talk to their friend. They're happy to do that. When it gets really serious, they talk to their partner, their female partner or female family members. When it gets really bad, stage 3 level, they talk to their mothers. So the problem was, if men at a certain age point are trying to talk to their mothers, and their mothers, depending on what age they are, may not be there. This is an interesting thing. So it's not a question that they're not talking, but they're choosing who they talk to. And the closer they have to their mothers or female partners, means they can open up faster. So they could come up. It was quite interesting, but it was such a small research that is not enough to be a big thing, but they are looking into it. It was such a fascinating information. That might explain why we see a lot of men. I see a lot of men in my practice because they choose women to talk to in counseling. I don't know if that's a statistic fact, but that might be something.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
There is a lot of data.
I know.
Men not sharing and letting things get really, really bad. Whereas women will talk about it before it gets to that point.
So it gets to the stage, yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. So someone's asked, is there such a thing as digital burnout? And if there is, how do we address it if your life is online? Because if you are digitally burnt out, but then every meeting for work is a Teams call, what, you know, Zoom call or whatever, what do you do? So any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to say. So, I mean, and Janice touched on it about Zoom fatigue. That is something that has been recognised during the pandemic. So things like switch, and I know people want to see each other, but sometimes it might be just a case of switching off the cameras and letting people know that this is, you know, why. If you're a leader and you're sort of able to influence the meeting, is just saying, okay, let's just have a meeting where everybody has the camera off from time to time. Asking whether so many virtual meetings are needed, you know, rather than having a Zoom meeting, pick up the phone, the good old-fashioned telephone, and speak to somebody, and see whether you can cut down on the number of virtual meetings. When you know, when I've sort of done this with some of my clients, when they've looked at, you know, really reassessed things, they really recognize they don't need as many meetings. I think a lot of the time people were thinking because they weren't working together that they needed to be in contact on a regular basis. And yes, people still need to be kept connected, but maybe look at reducing the number of virtual meetings. And the things that we've shared as well about making sure you take breaks, take screen breaks, go outside, get fresh air, practice mindfulness, all those sorts of things can help as well. And then also switching off from your digital products at the end of the day.
Lovely, thank you. I think this one would be good for you, Leyla. So here's a question. Hello panel. How have you supported senior managers and leaders to have meaningful conversations about burnout in organizations where it's a bad word or taboo subject? Yeah, so this person is a psychotherapist, and people are being told to get on with it, really, in a teaching environment. So yeah, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think I saw that question. I thought it was very helpful because I've been a school governor and it was exactly as you've described. I think so. I can start with having meaningful conversations, and I think those conversations can be much easier in corporate or private sectors because you can show certain things. For example, if this carries on, you're going to lose money. There's going to be a massive retention issue. Now, I'm not saying that should be the main driver. I'm not saying it should be from that standpoint, but my experience is that standpoint really works in those sectors. I think with schools it can be very, very tricky, and I think there is a lot of guilt pulling, as you've absolutely described, around teaching staff. We've got to be there for the families, we've got to be there for the young people, but of course many teachers are role modeling, and often it's the teachers that aren't in senior management that are saying, excuse me, this is not sustainable, this can't work. And depending on the kind of senior leadership team you have, if you have, my experience was with a head teacher that was very old-fashioned, very authoritarian. If I can deal with it, you should be able to deal with it. Now, there's lots of support there for head teachers, but it's whether they understand it. And it was almost an attitude of, well, it doesn't matter if we burn through teachers. We're such an amazing school. Everyone wants to work here. So that, you know, there's so many factors to it. So I would say it is a tricky conversation, but is there something about role modeling? If we're trying to create a healthy environment, most schools have things around, they have their values. How are teachers also embodying that? How is it going to come across in appraisals? Actually, can anyone in the governor team help us? Because sometimes that can be a bit of a driver for reflection. So two parts to that, really. Depends on the sector. What's the point where there's a bit of a crack where you can open that wider and have that conversation and realize the long-term impacts and role modeling?
Fantastic, so much great stuff there.
Could I add something to that quickly?
Yeah. You don't have to be quick. I was going to say, actually, everyone probably has something to contribute. So feel free, Carol.
Okay, yeah. So as I was a governor, and my remit was well-being. So if you can influence somebody who is a decision maker, who's on the board, about the importance of it, the benefits of it, the dangers if they don't address this, because it has to come from the top down. And so if you can even just get one person on your side who is influential and a decision maker, then that will then trickle down, because the senior, those at the top, need to walk the walk.
Lovely, thank you. And do you want to add anything, Janice? You might particularly want to come from the angle of what organisations can do to reduce burnout.
Yes, I think Leyla mentioned it before about systems. There may be systems that are in place that are just not supporting people's well-being or are getting in the way of people delivering them best and causing stress. So I think it could be helpful to review the systems and see how you could kind of redesign them so they can enhance, or ask your people, actually ask the people, what would make your life easier? What could we do to help you deliver your best? So yeah, that would be my thoughts.
Yeah, and I remember you talked about this idea of role modeling as well, being being the person who walks
walking the talk, actually. Yeah.
It makes a huge difference. Did you want to add anything, Obi?
Yeah, I did. I guess for me, I think it's education. I think a lot of people are assuming that they know what this is, or they know how to help, or they know that, oh, we've got EAP, so that's fine, and the teachers can go and access this. So there's some level of senior managers and leaders need retraining and sort of some level of training now, work to allow them to discuss it in more detail than what that looked like, so that they can make informed decisions about putting things in place. Because the system that get put in place usually get sanctioned by leaders, don't they? But if they're not clear on it and they have a misalignment about what's going on the ground, then it's not helpful. So, I mean, just like Leyla's work, we're trying to make sure that senior managers know what's happening and they're educated so they can make decisions. It's not helpful when they're walking around saying, oh, I did it in our day. Like your day wasn't the same kind of pressure. Like you might think it's the same, but it's not. So it's about educating, I think. Lovely. And they have to invest in training for that to happen.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. So a final question for you, bearing in mind we have a group of wonderful experienced coaches here. What coaching question should you ask yourself, do you think, if you think you might be on the verge of burnout? So if there's someone in the audience today thinking, oh, maybe I'm on the verge of burnout, I'm not quite sure, what coaching question could they be asking themselves? I'll go to Carol first.
Okay, so mine is a two-part question, if I can. So ask yourself, if you're feeling some of the symptoms of it being described, ask yourself, what will things be like in 6 months, a year from now, if I carry on as I am? And then what action can I take now to reduce those symptoms?
Brilliant question, brilliant question. I'll go to you now, Obi.
The coaching question I have is, what have you been putting up with in the last 3 months? What problems have you been thinking will go away soon, but they haven't actually?
Very good question. And Leyla.
So mine would be on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I'm feeling pretty low and 10 is I'm feeling mentally optimum. Where am I today? And what steps could I take to move me half a point in the direction I want to go?
Fabulous, fabulous. And Janice?
Just building on what's been said before, what 3 things could I do or start today that would help me move me in the right direction, improve my well-being?
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant questions that you can ask yourselves all on a daily basis. Check in with yourself and think about what the right and appropriate action to do is. We've got one last question, actually. It's just come in at the last moment, so I think I will ask it because we do have a couple of minutes. So how do you avoid self-sabotaging yourself with knowledge overload? How do you avoid
brilliant question.
Knowledge
how I would say is to just take action. If you're sabotaging yourself, it's because you're not taking the action anyway. So just do it. That's what I would say. And if you're scared to do it, find somebody who will hold you accountable to it.
Okay. Any other thoughts there?
I would say recognize we are at the age of information overload, and that can cause more stress as well. So limit the number of resources that you're consuming, the number of times you're searching for stuff on the internet. Maybe just find 1 or 2 trusted resources that can be your go-to resources, rather than you go on one site and it takes you a link to another site, and before you know it, you've got 20 screens open. And just be mindful of that as well.
Great. Did you want to say something, Janice? You're muted at the moment.
Someone had to do it. We were doing so well. Yes, I think it's just can find the time away from the screens actually, and maybe put yourself on a bit of a timer if you notice you get yourself going into a bit of a spiral actually. I know my daughter's started to do this actually. She can research and almost take herself down into a little bit of a spiral. Well, I think if you just limit, I think there's an app where you can limit how much time you spend. That might be helpful too.
Really, really good points. Yeah, you can limit how much time you spend on the internet. You can also use the Pomodoro technique, which is sort of 20-minute blocks of things. And also something that I think is really helpful is just-in-time learning. So not let me learn everything in case I might need it at some point, but actually what have I got coming up that I need to know something about? And that can help you be a bit more structured and not self-sabotage in that way. And also there's a lovely saying, isn't there? Everything works better if you unplug for a while. If you unplug it, it works better. So think about that balance between unplugging and not taking in knowledge versus how much time you're using to take in knowledge.
Thank you. You've actually said exactly what I was trying to say, which is just pick the thing and just do it instead of researching. I think there's something like over researching. Just find a couple and just do that, and then usually it will work. You don't need to go back into the drawing board to find more stuff. But yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Thanks, Jenny.
Lovely, lovely. Do you know, it's been amazing to see the chat today, because I've seen all of you share your experience, share your tips, share your knowledge as well. So if you are on this webinar, do look at the chat, because lots of people are sharing some really helpful tips alongside what the coaches have said. And coaches, you're getting lots of love from the audience in terms of how much they're appreciating what you've said, building and really helping them. So thank you very, 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 very much. Thank you everyone for attending today. A huge thanks to Janice Taylor, to Leyla, Okhai, to Carol Stewart, and to Obehi, Alofoje. You can find out more about them on the Diverse Coaching Directory. As I've said, it's a directory which connects corporate organizations with coaches from Black, Asian, and ethnic minority backgrounds, but also connecting individuals with them as well. So if you've thought, oh, these coaches, they resonated with me, particular person, you can contact them directly. They do take individual clients as well. And wonderful Snetta will be adding that link to the chat. And I want to say a huge thank you to Snetta, who's consistently helped and supported us with these webinars and is an invaluable support that we couldn't do without. I want to leave you with a quote from Michael Gungor. Burnout is what happens when you avoid being human too long. And it fits very much with a note that was in the chat just now about being human beings, not human doings. Yeah, so burnout is what happens when you avoid being human too long. We all want to be human, I think, don't we? So do look out for our directory, do go on, have a look at it, and we will be sharing a link to this recording later today with also some resources. And as always, do feel free to get in touch with myself as well at jennygarrett.global for all things around corporate life and work, particularly around gender balance and supporting those Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been an amazing start to my Tuesday. And yeah, let's not experience burnout. Let's get those strategies in place so we can be our very best selves. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
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 Hi, everyone.
I haven't taken a picture, so I'll just take a very quick one. Or if someone else wants to take it, they're welcome to as well. Shall I do it?
You do it.
Yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much. And I will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jenny. Take
everyone.
care.
Bye,
Bye,
ladies.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.